Congratulations! You decided to join millions of other sports fans as you enter the world of fantasy football. It may seem daunting, after all, there are nearly 1,700 NFL players that suit up every Sunday, but with a little bit of research and patience, you can heavily compete in any fantasy league with the right amount of dedication. Let me tell you, the stress as well as the game day highs and lows may make or break your weekend, but I'm here to tell you that it's worth it. Following the steps in this video will help you raise your championship trophy loudly and proudly in front of your friends, coworkers, and salty in-laws. So, let's begin. Let's talk about the fantasy roster. After the draft, your fantasy team will consist of 13 roster spots. Starting positions include 1 quarterback, 2 wide receivers, 2 running backs, a tight end, a flex spot, which can be any additional running back, receiver, or tight end, as well as a kicker and NFL team defense. On top of that, you'll have 6 bench spots of interchangeable players. I'd like to note that this is the default on most platforms. For instance, some leagues will have varying numbers of starting quarterbacks or receivers. Next, let's talk about the default scoring on game days. Some leagues change their scoring system based for touchdowns, field goals, etc. However, I'm going to go over the most basic universal scoring system that most leagues have in place. For non-quarterbacks, touchdowns, whether it be rushing or receiving, is 6 points. Running backs and receivers get 1 point for every 10 yards they accumulate. Furthermore, if you're in a PPR league, otherwise known as points per reception, you'll get 1 point per reception, and that goes for any player, not just wide receivers. Keep in mind, it seems as though when leagues are created today, most platforms offer half-point PPR formats as default. A player can also lose points for turnovers. Any player will lose 2 points for every fumble they commit. Quarterback scoring is a little bit different. They get 4 points for every passing touchdown, but 6 points for every rushing touchdown. They also get rewarded for passing yards, getting 1 point for every 25 yards they throw. They will get 1 point for every 10 yards rushing, just like the other position players. If a quarterback throws for 327 yards and 2 touchdowns, along with 1 rushing touchdown and 25 rushing yards, then he will accumulate 29 points in non-fractional scoring leagues. Kickers typically get 1 point for every extra point make, as well as 3 points for any field goal up to 39 yards, 4 points between 40 to 49, and 5 points for 50 plus. Team defenses get rewarded for turnovers, as well as the amount of points they give up. Here's a list of points they can earn throughout a game. Like any fantasy player, it's always vital to look for good matchups for defenses against low-scoring teams or inexperienced rookie quarterbacks. Let's talk about what some fantasy players consider to be the best day of the year, even competing with Christmas, and that would be the fantasy draft. Every player will be issued a draft position well in advance of the draft, and they will select players in this order in a snake format, taking 1 player per round. For instance, if you have the first pick in a 12-team league, you won't draft again until the 24th pick in the second round. This is fair because it prevents the person with the first pick and potentially best and most sought after player from picking again until late. I typically tell beginners to avoid auto-drafting. This method picks players at random based upon their ADP, otherwise known as average draft position. Letting the computer auto-draft for you will pick up defenses and kickers way too early, thus missing out on the higher upside bench players. Mock draft over and over again until you're blue in the face, especially on the platform of your fantasy league. This helps you better understand the ADP of a player and helps you better understand when players are taken. So when your real draft comes around, you'll be prepared and be able to strategize key players you'd like to pursue. So now that the draft is over and the season is underway, let's now talk about what to expect during a typical fantasy football week. Let's look at a timeline for week 1. The first NFL game will be on Thursday Night Football, thus kicking off the NFL football season. The vast majority of games will take place on Sunday, beginning at 1 p.m. Eastern Time up until the primetime matchup during Sunday Night Football. The fantasy week ends with the conclusion of Monday Night Football, and the fantasy team with the higher amount of points against their opponent will get the W. Remember, week to week, you're playing against other individual teams, not the league as a whole. All non-roster players are considered free agents and are locked during their waiver period. Tuesdays are typically days where you pick players on waivers before they are awarded to teams with a higher waiver position or priority. This happens early Wednesday morning, typically around 4 a.m. Waivers work by priority and are usually awarded based upon your draft order. In default leagues, first pick players usually get the last waiver position, with the last pick getting the first waiver position. If multiple people in your league claim a player during waivers, the person with the higher waiver position will get the player, but their waiver priority will move to last once they pick up the player. Some leagues go by a FAB system, which stands for Free Agent Acquisition Budget. In this format, all players begin the season with $100 worth of FAB spending. During waiver periods, players make blind bids for players they'd like to acquire, and the person with the highest bid will get the player. However, even if you bid $10 and the next manager spends $5, you'll still have to pay the full amount. In this format, waiver priority still matters in cases where players bid the same amount. After waivers are over, all players are now free agents, and it becomes first come first served to claim these players. Once that particular player's NFL game starts, they become locked and are no longer free agents, becoming a waiver player once more. Collusion and fantasy ethics. Nobody enjoys cheating in a competitive league, especially when it's between two or more parties to create an unfair advantage over other teams. This is called collusion. Your league's commissioner should have a set guideline and rules to combat cheating. What qualifies as collusion can be subjective, but there are some things to look out for. Collusion examples can be players tanking a week to give advantage for another player, or through highly unfair trades when it seems as though someone has completely punted the season away. Violations should include expulsion from the league or forfeiture of monetary payouts. Hopefully, your league commissioner is fair and just when it comes to collusion in your league. Fantasy football is highly worthwhile and worth the time and effort you spend in creating the best fantasy roster you can muster. However, some managers may question whether it's skill or luck involved in the game, but I'm here to tell you that it's both. Nonetheless, seasoned fantasy players can tilt the odds in their favor. Securing the championship is akin to a raffle, where every participant starts with just one ticket, but through diligent research, strategic trades, well-timed waiver moves, and other astute maneuvers, you can amass additional raffle tickets, significantly increasing your chances of claiming that highly coveted trophy. Once you etch your name on that trophy, display it loudly and proudly for everyone to see, as you realize the time and effort you spent was justified. If you like this video, please subscribe and click that bell icon for future fantasy tips and strategies. Together, we'll do our best to prove to our peers that we have what it takes to become a fantasy football champion.